DOGE scoring major legal victories yesterday when two district judges denied temporary restraining orders, one preventing the Trump administration from mass firing of federal employees, the other keeping DOGE from accessing federal data systems across multiple agencies. National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett explaining how the Trump administration is determining which government jobs to cut. Watch.
I think our objective is to make sure that the employees that we pay are being productive and effective. The point is that don't just talk about the IRS, talk about all of government. That there are so many places. I live in D.C. You maybe live in D.C. where nobody's going into the buildings. People aren't commuting because nobody's doing their job.
So you're saying that everybody who's being let go was doing a bad job?
I'm saying that we're studying every agency and deciding who to let go and why. And we're doing so very rationally with a lot of support from analysis.
By a lot of people who have been let go at other agencies that they were told they were being dismissed because of poor performance, when in some cases they haven't even had a performance review yet because they've only been on the job a couple of months. Yeah,
I've never seen a person who was laid off for poor performance say that they were performing poorly. Okay.
Touche. Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller exposing the left's hypocrisy over their outrage when it comes to Elon Musk. Watch this.
Many of the people in this room for 4 years failed to cover the fact that Joe Biden was mentally incompetent. It is also true that many people in this room who have used this talking point that Elon is not elected fail to understand how government works. The threat to democracy, indeed the existential threat to democracy, is the unelected bureaucracy of lifetime tenured civil servants who believe they answer to no one.
All right, Caroline. So it's interesting because all of this outrage about the things that Elon Musk is doing and how he's targeting, one important point that we brought up multiple times already, it's going to be up to Congress to enact many of these cuts. It can't all be by executive order, but light is shining on waste and fraud in the government, thanks to Musk.
As to the need for Congress to intervene, it's yes and no. There's something called impoundment, where the president can't just disappear an agency outright without the consent of Congress, but he can cancel ideological spending and redirect it to other purposes that are within the confines of that department as outlined in the law. So what he's doing with federal layoffs and mass layoffs is constitutionally sanctioned insofar as that the executive has control over his administration, and he can determine how many staff he has. And look, as a country, we've long operated under the assumption that the civil service can act basically independent of the president and can kind of go rogue and even defy the president. That's not how this works. They are at obligation to follow his orders and to implement his agenda. And so by getting rid of some of those excessive numbers and honestly some of the ones that are going to cause trouble for Trump, that's 100% within his rights. And when it comes to the agency's scope and size largely, that is going to come down to, can we shrink this?
Mm-hmm. And the federal building point is very well. I mean, that's one of the biggest things. Elon Musk and others have said, you go to these. Kevin Hassett said that you go to these buildings, no one's there, and then they're finding government employees that they're not on one payroll but two, double salaries. I mean, there's that's why you need forensic accounting. You need that's why they need access to the programs. In my opinion,
you're
what
right,
do you
Cheryl.
think?
You want to throw in the private contractors too, but people in Washington should have seen this coming. My goodness, you now have a budget deficit of $2 trillion. The government is spending $2 trillion more than it's taking in terms of revenues. If this had been a private corporation, you would have had scores of layoffs, thousands of layoffs a long time ago. And whose fault is this? Well, it's the fault of the Biden administration. The past 5 years, you've had government spending growing by 8% annually. That's insane, especially when you consider the 5 contiguous years ending 2019, government spending's growing by only 4%. It was definitely in the pipeline, and now it's hitting hard, and it's a wake-up call. And as you said, there's a lack of accountability. Government's gotten so big that the overseers can't control what people are doing. Talking about performance reviews, well, how could they possibly possibly do performance reviews if nobody's coming to the office?
Right. Well, and you know, you could make the argument that that could be a work from home performance review, but that's the other, you know, so it's going to be interesting to see, you know, if these, you know, the buyouts have been, several have been accepted, but a lot weren't, you know, and we thought that we were going to get, I think it was, you know, we were looking for 10% of the federal workforce. I think the buyouts, it's less than that at this point on a percentage basis, Caroline.
Yes, I think there's going to be, you know, it's going to remain to be seen how many, you know, staff actually take this offer.
Right.
Very generous offer, by the way. It's simply a great way to weed out, as I've said in previous shows, kind of the ideologues from the Biden administration that will resist Trump as he's trying to implement his mandate.
And that's what they're trying to do. Yeah, and you know, and after just 1 month back in office, this is interesting. You know, President Trump has already predicted now a red wave for 2026. Listen to the president.
Nobody can believe what's happened to this party. It's become a big party, really big and powerful party. We won 85% of all counties in America. Think of that, 85%. Have you seen the map? It's all red. In presidential races, they say when you win the presidency, usually the midterms don't go well. I think we're going to do great. I think we're going to really increase our margins by a lot.
You know, the Republican Party already seeing a major shift. Kentucky Senator Mitch McConnell announcing yesterday he will not seek re-election, ending a 4-decades-long Senate career. Politico is pointing out his exit marks the end of an era in GOP politics as the party moves in a new direction. Vice President J.D. Vance is using the change, to appeal to the younger voters out there. Watch.
The president keeps us on a pretty breakneck pace because I think he realizes this is a special moment in time. My message to young people generally is we're trying to make your life better. And that is the simple thrust of President Trump's policy is we want you to be able to buy a home. We want you to be able to work a good job. We want you to be able to raise your kids, like I said, according to the values that you believe in.
You know, it's interesting that looking back at Mitch McConnell and his career, Perry Bacon in the Washington Post writes this morning, McConnell is the second most important political figure of our time. He talks about he's the one that started the resistance movement against Barack Obama when he was president. He is the one that really said, okay, it is, you know, it's red and blue. He started that movement decades ago to really. That was the big sea change in politics that we had not seen back in the 90s, for example.
And he got some major conservative victories on the board. I don't think we give him credit enough. He was a master chess player of the Senate. He knew that institution inside and out. He got the 2017 tax cuts basically over the finish line, and he got 3 constitutionalist Supreme Court justices confirmed. And so that's his legacy. Yeah. Are his national security views outdated to a lot of young people in the party? 100%. And I think his departure solidifies the generational shift in the GOP.
Yeah, and J.D. Vance, a millennial, so the first millennial vice president, and talking about, because it is about the future of the party. The average age of a senator right now is 65 years old. Just pointing that out. All right, we're just getting started this morning.